I felt for a long time, like, I don't get my daughters. I don't know that I will ever get my daughters. I know how I need to show up for them, but I don't really understand them. And I think it's easy for a girl dad to think, well, I don't get them, I can't be as important. Like, no, you're not more important than mom, but you are way more important than you can imagine. And I always phrase it this way, like, never underestimate the importance of a girl's father.
My friend, you matter. The fact that you got up today, put your feet on the ground, and decided to step into your role as a father is critical. Our world is in desperate need of men like you who are stepping into the adventure of fatherhood. 3 nuggets that hit me from my conversation with my friend Locke Haman today are: 1, how to use humor to connect with and teach your kiddos; 2, the importance of taking action as a man; and 3, the value, the need for you to love yourself so that you can step into your role fully as a father. Welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast, where I interview incredible fathers, gaining wisdom from their stories for you and I to grow in our craft. I'm your guide, Ned Shout, father to 5 kiddos, currently ages 12 to 18, and husband to my rad wife, Sarah, working on our 21st year of marriage. So yep, I'm in the thick of it, and I am working daily to rebel against the low expectations for fathers and create a world where fathers know who they are as they show up for their families. You and I have the greatest opportunity to impact our world through the way we embrace our fatherhood role. This episode is brought to you by the Adventure of Fatherhood, helping men discover their powerful fatherhood role and build their fatherhood skills. The role of the father is to serve, guide, steward, protect, and of course, find joy and have fun in the messiness of it all. Today's guest is my friend Locke Haman. He is a coach for fathers, and he shares his story of waking up 7 years ago and deciding to embrace the fullness and the adventure of fatherhood. All right, my friends, here we go. I'm already smiling ear to ear to connect with a new friend, father, to talk about what matters most to us, our families. Locke, welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes. How are you feeling this morning?
Ned, thank you for having me. I am doing well. You say this morning, it's not even morning for me. We talked about the time difference in location, but I'm coasting into my afternoon, getting ready to head out to basketball practice after this for my son. So I'm feeling excited to talk, excited to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, I love it, dude. Yeah, so funny. And that's a beautiful thing about technology. I'm sitting here on an island in the middle of nowhere, and you are on the opposite side of the country.
Exactly.
Locke, first question for you. How old do you find yourself today?
So I'm 38 years old, depending on who you ask in my house. That is really old, or that is not too old, depending on the kid and how insulting they want to be. But yeah, I'm 38 years old.
Love it. And how many years you've been married?
So we just had our 11th anniversary.
Nice.
And that happened to be, we got married on the 1-year anniversary of when we met. So it's nice. It keeps all the dates really easy to remember.
Yeah, simple.
So 11 years, 12 years of being together, basically.
Cool. And then how many kiddos do you have, and what are the spread of ages?
Yeah, 4 kids. Our oldest is a boy. He's 14. And then we got 3 girls. They are 10, 7, and 5, and a handful.
10. Say that again.
10, 7, and 5, and they're a handful. They're spicy. We like to say they're spicy.
Yes, I know all about that. We have, 4 girls and a boy. So I get that. My boy, so I have an 18-year-old daughter. She's our first one to go to college. So super gnarly the last 3 months. Nice. She's coming back for Christmas and Thanksgiving soon, which I'm pumped on. Then we have a 16-year-old girl, and then we have 15-year-old twins. So they were like the surprise, boy, girl. They were born on my birthday, which is 4th of July, which was thank God I got my boy in there. Which is funny to say now that you have girls, right? Like you would probably resonate with that. Because girls are so freaking amazing. And then my youngest is 12 and girl. So it's Very a wonderful thing. So what do you do for the family? What do you do to provide for the family and then provide value out in the world? Now, I love and hate this question. It's a little bit unique for you. Most men kind of size each other up, based on what we do. But at the same time, the reason why I asked the question is whether you are president of the United States or you are, manager over at Walmart, when you have a daughter, When you have a son, you have a son, and all that comes with that. So I like to ask it because fatherhood is truly a level playing field, right? We're all going to experience these moments of fatherhood. But with that in mind, I do think it's helpful for men to know like what it is we do. So what do you do to provide value in the world and provide for your family?
Yeah. So the biggest thing on my plate right now in terms of how passionate I am is I run a number of men's groups and I do some coaching with guys. And it's interesting to me that that's where I ended up. It's a little bit of a sidestep here because I was incredibly hesitant to receive coaching and to join a men's group. And so it
Mm,
was incredibly impactful in my life, and then kind of eye opening when I stepped into that leadership opportunity to begin doing that for other guys. Before that, I was actually in the real estate field. I owned a real estate brokerage for almost a decade, and sold that a couple of years ago, and have kind of transitioned into running the coaching business.
mm,
And I'm trying to make it a full-time thing. I've been blessed to have done fairly well with some investments in the real estate business that I've been given a little bit of a runway. We were kind of talking about this before we even started recording. And I'm trying to scale up this coaching business, trying to help as many guys as I can. Because like I said, kind of a reluctant leader type position. I see the need. I know you see the need
yeah.
for guys supporting guys in becoming better husbands, fathers, or just, career based, just man based, like however it is that we need to improve. So that's my big passion, and that's how I'm bringing, I hope, bringing a lot of value to the guys is somebody who's been through it before, somebody who's screwed it all up before. We can talk about all kinds of different ways I've screwed it up if you want, and giving them some fire, some accountability, some brotherhood, and the settings to receive that. That I think is the big place that I bring value. If you ask my son right now, it's coaching basketball,
Oh, love
but
it.
yeah, that's my main passion right now.
So I'd love to know from you, what was that? And I could share mine with you is
Hmm.
what's that moment where you go, okay, fatherhood matters big time, but
Hmm.
also I don't want to just lean into it for my family. I want to help other men because, if you're in the real estate game, you're not, it's not hard to convince somebody they need to buy a house or however you are involved, and you're going to make good money doing that. Whereas
Hmm.
you go tell a dad, hey, let's do coaching or read a book or like let's level you up as a dad. That's definitely a harder sell. So you
Oh
weren't
yeah.
looking at it like I'm going to go make millions of dollars doing this, but there was a desire for you to like, I've got to share the good news with other dudes that they matter. So tell me both those moments when you realized for yourself and why you had to tell other men.
Hmm. Yeah. So my wife and I joke that most of the things we learned by screwing them up first,
Mm-hmm.
as parents in our relationship, kind of all around. And I think that rings true for when I realized how important I was as a father, and it was
Mm.
seeing the negative effect and the pain that kind of gave me. And I tell the story about this wake up call that I got over a span of a week, and this was about 7 years ago. So right after my 7-year-old was born, and the first thing I realized was, and it's more than just about fatherhood, so I'll include those pieces. But the first thing directly applies to your question. I realized Monday morning, I'm running my real estate brokerage still at the time. Monday mornings, couple Mondays in a row, I started to realize that my two older kids started avoiding me in the morning. They just
Mm.
kind of disappear, and it took me a little while to notice. I'm sure it was going on for a while, and I like, just kids are so intuitive that they probably subconsciously just put it together like, oh, it's Monday, daddy's usually kind of a dick on Mondays, let's just
Yeah.
stay away from him.
Yeah.
For me, it was obviously I didn't want to go to work, right? But there were still many other things. A couple days later, sometime midweek, my wife said, hey, listen, not sure you're the man I married, not sure this is going to work out. And we had, in fights,
Mm.
when you fight and
Yeah.
you're angry, you say mean things. This was like calm, cool, collected.
Mm.
This one,
The
it
real
was
moment.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the 1-2 punch. And then on a Saturday, uh, I don't, again, things not going well that week. I'm not the nicest guy. I'm not the best man. I'm not the best father. I'm definitely not the best husband. And my wife and I are starting to get into it out by the swing set with the kids. And we went inside. And I remember just having this epiphany moment where I realized not only do I not like myself, not
Hmm.
only do I not love myself, I actually hate myself. Like I have a lifetime habit or addiction of self hatred back to my earliest memories, actually, where it's just everything. It was like, oh, I hate my haircut. I hate my name. I hate the clothes, my hand me down
Hmm.
clothes. I hate this. I hate that. And you tell that same story over and over again. You start to believe the story, and your brain
Yeah.
just hears, I hate me. And then you start living it out. And it's a self fulfilling prophecy. So it was, this was a bad week. I have these three realizations, and I realized how badly my crap, my baggage, is spilling out onto my wife and onto my kids. And for at the time, I guess 7 and 3 or 4 year old to be aware enough to avoid me, that was a really, really bad wake up call. But what I've been telling a lot of guys is there's no shame in needing the wake up call. There's just shame in not waking up.
Yeah.
And luckily, I woke up at that point. I'd missed, I think, a lot of wake up calls before that, but that was the one that
Hmm.
that rang true to me, and highlighted the importance that I played. Whether it's not a hierarchical thing in terms of fathers being more important, but everything trickles down from us, right? We are the
Hmm.
head of the family. That doesn't mean that we're not on equal footing with our wives, but my energy transfers to her, and
Hmm.
therefore that transfers down to the kids. My energy transfers straight to the kids, and I got a front row seat to how badly that energy was transferring to everyone else, that the only people that mattered to me. And luckily that began the wake up. It wasn't an overnight thing. And that kind of brought me along this journey. And I think the second piece of your question was highlighting the importance of other dads out there. Um, I mean, we could quote all kinds of different statistics. I'm sure you've quoted some of these before. I use
What's
them all
one
the
that?
time.
Yeah. What's one that really just like hits you hard? What's one? And I
Okay,
know that there's
I'm
yeah.
gonna
What's
go.
one?
I'm gonna go two different aspects because
Okay.
if
Perfect.
you dive into my content and my stuff, I talk a lot about being. I think you're a different dad to your son than you are to your daughter.
Hmm.
In this case, one son for each of us, and then daughters.
Yeah.
And so I think of it in two different ways. Um, your son is headed into a world where men are in trouble in general. And if you look at some of the statistics, men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide. I'm going to screw some of these up. I don't have them all memorized off the top of my
It's the
head,
heart
but
behind it. It's all good.
three times more likely to be incarcerated, 3 times more likely to be an addict. I think 12 times more likely to be homeless,
Hmm.
40% less likely to go to college. The deck is stacked against our sons. And the only way to get our sons out of that situation, because we can't just wish them a better hand, if we're going to use that
Right.
metaphor, we have to help them play the hell out of the hand they have. And the only way to do that is to lead them.
Hmm.
And that comes down on you as the father, period. A single mom, if you don't have a man in your son's life, like, you can do the best you can do, but you got to get men in his life, whether it's
Yep.
literally a father figure or other kind of role models. For daughters, there's a whole list of statistics. They've done all kinds of studies. Daughters with good relationships with their dad, close relationships with their dad, are way less likely to abuse drugs, way less likely to engage in early sexual activity, much more confident, have higher standards for their future relationships with men,
Hmm.
um, have go farther in school and education, higher levels of education. They actually make more money. I don't know how you track that, but they make more money. So all of these things prove, and this is just daughters, right? I'm sure a lot of this is true for sons as well, but they've specifically studied this with daughters. And I was saying to you before we hit record, I felt for a long time like I don't get my daughters. I don't know that I will ever get my daughters. I know how I need to show up for them, but I
Hmm.
don't really understand them. And I think it's easy for a girl dad to think, well, I don't get them, I can't be as important. Like,
Mm.
no, you're not more important than mom, but you are way more important than you can imagine. And I always phrase it this way, like, never underestimate the importance of a girl's father. And I would
Mm.
say the same thing is true for boys as well. But yeah, I look at sons and daughters differently, not in terms of love, but in the way we have to deal with them. And so that I would break it out to the different sexes that way.
Mm. Beautiful. I love it. So much good stuff there. Let's go back for a moment to the crappy, wonderful week, right? The week
Yeah.
of starting to wake up. Is there anything you could put your finger on to why you leaned into this? I'm going to love and lead and serve my family well versus I'm going to turn to the bottle, or I'm going to
Yeah.
even turn to, let's pick something good. I'm going to go become a gym addict or a hobby freak or whatever. Those things aren't bad, right? Drink alcohol if you want, go to the gym, both fine things, right? It's when they take over as examples of the stepping into like your opportunity to love and serve your family. So I think a lot of men can kind of become passive and whatever, or they can, just just lean into work or whatever. So
Yeah.
can you put your finger on why this wake up call, like you took advantage or made the most of the opportunity?
That's a great question. I think in a nutshell, because I didn't have there was no other alternative.
Well, you could
If I didn't,
divorce and walk away from your family.
and that was unacceptable to me
Oh, and
because,
why?
because, I don't think that it, it goes back to like some of the statistics we were just talking about. I had enough evidence in my childhood. Like my parents are still together, but I knew plenty of kids whose parents were divorced. I knew enough about the statistics. It just, it would have killed me to think that I was leaving my kids behind to failure.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that just if you grew up in a broken home, or if you're considering divorce, I'm not saying your kids are 100% screwed, but there's no way you can honestly look at that situation and think that they're better off because of the divorce. I guess unless it's like an explosively abusive
But
relationship.
rare. Yeah, let's go with
Yeah,
that. So that's
rarely.
rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I looked at those alternatives because I knew my wife wasn't BSing me. I knew it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't an angry fight where maybe she didn't, she thought the thought, she meant it at the time, but, maybe she wouldn't mean it in 4 hours or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
She was calm. I knew she wasn't BSing me. And deep down inside, I knew she was right. I knew that I was slipping backwards. And the alternatives were just unacceptable to me. And I don't know how to better articulate that. It was like I had this fight in me still and I think a lot of guys are like this. And I don't think that this should be a source of shame, but a lot of guys need a fight, need an obstacle to overcome.
Mm.
And now we can recreate that. Like you're saying, going to the gym was a better option than hitting the bottle, but still a numbing mechanism, right? In this same
If you're
sense,
choosing it for that, yes.
right. In this same sense, we can use this tendency of, and I think it's almost universal for men to want an obstacle to push through. We can use that in a proactive, positive way, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
let's get really freaking clear on our goal. Let's make it big enough that it's kind of scary but really exciting. Let's surround ourselves with accountability, right? It's the same concept, except I did it by accident and I didn't do it in a positive way. I put myself in the hole,
Mm-hmm.
and there was like staying in the hole was not an option. I was going to lose
Mm-hmm.
my kids. I was going to lose my wife, and I didn't really care about the business at that point. But
Right.
probably with that kind of crap storm brewing in my life, probably would have lost the business too. And to lose my kids and my wife was unacceptable to me. I
Yeah.
wasn't willing to do that. And so, I talk to a lot of guys having some issues in their marriage, and I'll throw this out, and I want to explain this because at first blush, this might sound horrible. If we didn't have kids, I wouldn't have been willing to fight as hard to
Mm.
get out of that hole. And I like a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'll stay together for the kids." That's not at all what I'm saying. And I know my wife feels the same way as well. She came from a home. There was a divorce. There was lots of anger, lots of yelling, lots of trauma, some abuse, and neither of us were willing, or both of us were willing to work that much harder to prevent it for the kids. So it wasn't like we're just going to be miserable and be roommates. It increased the willingness we were willing to, the work we were willing to endure. And I think that was a key piece of it for me, specifically the kids. right? Like if I was in that same situation without kids, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be together still. And we have a wonderful, loving, incredible relationship now. We still have our flaws. We still screw up. We still get in
Of
fights,
course. Yeah.
but it's completely different. And that extra fire under my ass of having at the time only 3 kids, that was a huge piece of it too. Like I would not be able to live with myself abandoning my kids. And that's what I felt like I would be doing if I didn't get my shit together.
Yeah. Yeah. We could go on and on. There's so much to unpack here. But one question I want to ask you is, it's been 7 years since that kind of awakening, right? Okay. So I think some men at that moment could go into, I'm a man, I'm just going to control everything around me. Like, she said that shit to me, fine. I'm just going to prove you wrong, that I'm a great dad, I'm a great husband. And we start doing actions, right? Tasks. Clean the dishes 100 days in a row to show you like, like I'm freaking a warrior. But to be 7 years down the road, you did something else, right? You didn't just lean into like discipline, which is great, right? Do the discipline things. But the core component of this is you said you didn't love yourself. And I think a lot of men feel that way, right? So clearly you've done the work, which is the foundational groundwork to love yourself, accept yourself, not think my haircut's terrible, my chin is dumb, whatever, all these things like you were talking about. How did you do that? How did you begin to love yourself for the sake of those around you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll give you the first step, and then like the longer picture is a little bit different. The longer picture is like, it's a long journey. Like, let's just throw that out there first. Like, this is not an overnight thing. But the first step, it was a weird kind of situation that happened in that week. So the day before that third piece, that beginning of a fight that led to, I mean, I would call it a breakdown, because I remember being at the top of our stairs. I collapsed to the floor on my butt in the middle of my wife yelling at me, justifiably yelling at me because of whatever I had just said.
Yeah.
When the realization hit me and I said something to her and I was crying and she saw it, she came out of the anger. Like, that's how she could tell it was something really just happened.
Yeah.
The day before that, I had gotten in the mail a book, an incredibly short book. And I'm trying to remember his first name, Kamal. So there's Naval Ravikant and there's Kamal Ravikant. They're brothers. And Naval is very well known for a lot of kind of philosophical pieces, a lot of venture capital investing, that kind of stuff. But his brother, Kamal, I believe that's his name, wrote a book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And I read it in an hour the day before this happened.
Wow.
And
okay.
The picture on the front cover is just a black and white kind of shadow of a guy holding a revolver to his head.
Wow.
And, love yourself like your life depends on it. And it was crazy because in that moment, I have this breakdown. I kind of like not metaphorically limp to bed that night. And the next morning I wake up and I'm like, how the hell am I going to fix this? Because like the question you asked, not fixing it is not an option. And I was like, wait, I already have the first step. I just read this yesterday. And there's a lot of great things in that book. And this is going to sound cheesy or corny or overly simplistic, but the first step for me, perfectly timed receiving that book before, was one chapter, 2 or 3 pages of the book where he talks about suffering with a similar thing of not loving himself, not liking himself. And he talks about the number of thoughts we have in a day and how often they're negative and all of this stuff. And his idea was, let's make the most often thought in your head, I love myself. Okay, how do you do that? You literally walk around reminding yourself, set an alarm, like write it on your hand, whatever you need to do to remind yourself, walking around in your downtime saying, I love myself. I love myself. I love myself in your head. And it sounded so weird to me, but I was desperate. And so I would do this as much as I could remember. I would, put my kids in bed and I would go stand in the mirror upstairs in the bathroom and I would get as close as I could and I would look myself in the eyes, which was really uncomfortable. If you've never done that, just do that for 60 seconds in silence. Don't break the eye contact. It's incredibly uncomfortable. And I would just, under my breath, I would repeat it. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. And I'll be honest, I still struggle with this sometimes. I still
Hmm.
struggle with imposter syndrome. I still struggle with being hard on myself. But that was the first step that got me out of that hole, was trying to make that the number one occurring thought in my head. And then the rest of the pieces, it opened up just enough room. It wasn't magical. It didn't fix anything overnight. But what it did was it gave me, A, it gave me hope.
Hmm.
And B, it opened up just enough room for the other pieces to kind of slide in. The other skills that I might have already known about, but I wasn't implementing, or now I'm looking for resources that I can use, or, I'm looking for another book to read or a podcast or whatever it is. I had always been big into self-development, but it was very
Yeah.
external focused. It was Success
Yes.
Magazine. It was
Yeah.
making money. It was business, right?
Hmm.
I had never turned it inside. And that book was the first step to turning that focus, that drive to improve, into my inner world. And then I was fine. When you buy a new car, you see that car everywhere. You're like,
Yeah.
wait, everybody has this car. I didn't
Hmm.
know that. It's kind of like that. I started seeing opportunities, resources, books, podcasts, all kinds of different things. And I started trying to grow as much as I could. And honestly, it was out of desperation at first, but sometimes that's the best motivation. And that book was, it was like a gift from God the day before.
Hmm.
I don't even
Oh,
know.
yeah.
It was crazy. So that was the first step.
Locke, this really, I think, open my eyes a bit more, or clarify. Let's say clarify more clearly. I love the scripture. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and then just as equally is love your neighbor as yourself. And I think we forget, we don't pay attention much to the as yourself component, right? So it's easy to go easy, right? Being simplistic, but it's easy to say love God. It's easy to say love your neighbor, but that as yourself, like we get that. Like that makes sense. I should love other people, right? Um, but to do it as yourself, um, we are so hard on ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves because we know ourselves better than anybody, right? I mean, we know the good, the bad, the ugly. We know the thoughts that we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe
Yeah.
I responded. I reacted that way. And so like, if we go back to the importance of a father being around, and I know we've said like, it's not, the father's not more important, but the father really helps solidify the identity of the child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you matter. And it's not just so much that my son and my daughter needs to hear me say you matter. I need to say you matter so much and express that so much through their life, so that they start to say, when they look in the mirror, I matter.
Mm.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
the as yourself. We need to say that you matter so that they can say it to themselves. They say, hey, if my dad says it's true, it must be true. So I'm going to believe it. And I think that's the power of the father, but you can't do it. And this is what I'm getting more clarity on from you. You cannot do it unless you first do it as yourself. Right. You
Absolutely.
cannot love your neighbor unless you first love yourself. And I think that the clarity around that just was like locked in for me a bit more today.
Yeah.
So super
Well,
cool.
to use that same language you're using, you can't teach your kids to love themselves if you don't love yourself. Right.
And here's the problem, and not the problem, but as fathers, the bar so damn low
Mm.
that if you show up, you wake up, you go to work, you come home, like you're crushing it compared to many. Right. And so, and I'm sure that the statistics of like me not killing myself and me not, and me, whatever, not having a shitty life are going to be pretty good. But what would the difference be as a 40-year-old man today for me to be so confident in who I am if my father really helped my identity be, have a foundation. And so I think that just the statistics of like, I didn't kill myself compared to like really abundant, beautiful life. Like that's our opportunity.
Mm.
Our opportunity is to help our kids have like, what if families look like in 1,000 years? Like the way you and I show up today, like we're passing that down if we take it that serious. And that's abundance. That's blessing. That's our opportunity.
Yeah.
But it starts
Absolutely.
with you loving yourself, which I think is phenomenal. So let me ask this question, because you did say good parents, good parents. Your parents are still together, I believe you said.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, what's something that you, and you're 38, so what's something that you loved about your dad or appreciated? Let's use that. What's something you appreciated about your dad, and what's something you wish your dad would have done differently?
Hmm. Good questions. I love, I love, I love those questions. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the second one,
Mm.
especially because what I did part of this process the past couple of years, and I coach a lot of guys to do this as well, is to start with these two questions that are really related. And, what do you wish your dad had taught you? And
Hmm.
what conversations you wish your dad had had with you? And
Beautiful.
you're writing a to-do list with your kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Killer.
and so I've thought about that a lot. Um, since I started with that one, let me just give you my answer to that. I wish my dad had just had more of these kind of conversations
Hmm.
with me. Um, Not even like just dropping knowledge bombs, left and right, just more conversations about what it means to be a man, a
Hmm.
husband, a
Hmm.
father. One of the things I've been doing with my son, who's 14 now, is we've been sitting down and, I realized that so much of my definition of what a man should be, good definitions, came from movies because I
Mm.
didn't have a lot of men around me that I wanted to emulate. And I said, well, that's kind of weird. I had a conversation with my dad. We talked about it. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do is go to my son. I'm like, this is what we're going to do. Here's a list of these great movies that I think taught me how to be a man. We're going to watch them together. Then we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about, we have some standard questions, but it's like, what did you learn from this? Like, what did you like about that main character? How do you think he screwed up? What would you have done differently?
Mm.
And we just watched The Patriot. And so The Patriot, great movie.
So
But
good.
there's this dynamic between Mel Gibson and his oldest son, Heath Ledger. And now I get to have this conversation with my son where I'm like, do you see how the father told the son not to do something, the son didn't listen? He's like, yeah, the father doesn't understand the son's perspective. The son doesn't understand the father's perspective. He doesn't want him to go off to war. The son wants to go off to war. And in the end, he goes off to war. And then through that, he realizes how right his dad was, and his dad realizes how right he was. And now my son and I get to have this conversation about this. And
Yeah.
I wish my dad had done more of that. Um, he did a lot of great things, and he made a lot of mistakes too, I'm sure. But I wish we had had more conversations like that, just kind of low key, low level, just shooting the breeze about this kind of thing, because I had to go and figure all this stuff out for myself.
Hmm.
What he did that I love, I had this cool moment a couple of years ago where I was maybe 2 or 3 years ago where I was rolling around on the floor with probably all my kids, and I said something, and it was this weird. It wasn't quite an out of body experience, but it was my dad's voice that came out of my
Hmm.
mouth, and it was like just these like subconscious memories. I must have been so small that I don't remember the actual playing, but I something clicked. The words I said must have been like the exact same thing that he said. My voice sounds very similar to his voice, and it was one of those things. Was like, oh yeah, good memories playing with him, and like now
Hmm.
I'm replicating that with my kids, and I'm rolling around on the floor playing with him. So I love, especially in the young years, how much he played with us. He played,
Hmm.
my older brother and I. He would be, perpetual quarterback, and we'd go one on one in the backyard playing football. He taught us how to play basketball. Um, just all the games that we played. And I
Hmm.
do feel like I probably pulled away at a certain age, but I think he probably took a step back because I remember when he stopped playing basketball with us and how we missed it. And so, flip that into something I wish he had done, or maybe some advice to the dads, like, don't ever stop playing with your kids. Like my son is 14. We still play basketball, partly because he still can't beat me. And I don't plan on letting him. He's going to have to earn that.
Yeah. Earn it.
But like all these games that he plays, you know, sometimes I don't feel like playing, and then I play and I'm like, oh yeah, I get to be a kid with him. So like I wish my dad kept playing with me, and I need to keep playing with our kids. And I would say all the dads out there should keep playing with their kids no matter how old they are.
Yeah. Why do you think your dad pulled back?
I was a tough kid to deal with. I had an explosive temper, and I think I know I had a conversation with him that at one point he was like, I know Locke is smart. I know he's a good person, and he needs to find his own path because my
Hmm.
path, he's resisting my path. And so it was a good intentioned decision, I think, to take a little bit of a step back. We were always battling. Like, I'm smart, but I never got good grades because I didn't try hard in
Mhm.
school. And my older brother got straight A's and he was just as smart. And, I know that it was a little disappointing. My dad's a 40-year high school English professor. So I know it irked him. And I went to the high school that he taught at.
Uh-huh.
We grew up on campus. And so, all of my teachers were his friends. I know it bothered him. And I think it was a little bit of self-preservation, taking a step back, but also it was well intentioned, because it's like, if I keep butting heads with Locke, I'm going to push him away.
Mm.
And I'm just going to trust that he's going to turn out okay. He's a good kid in a good environment, and he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying that to me at one point. And I respect that. I get that, and I respect that. On some level, I think he made the right decision. On another level, I think that part of me wishes he kept fighting for me. I don't
Mhm.
know what would have happened. I don't know how much we would have butted heads. But I do think that every child wants their parents, especially their father, to fight for them. And that's definitely one lesson that I've taken away with, especially my son. When I see him, dragging his feet, metaphorically, not working as hard as he could, I've had to change my approach and soften my approach. But I'm not going to pester him, but I'm also never going to kind of give up on him. I'm always going to be fighting to help him reach his potential in the ways that he wants, right? Like, the way that I want him to reach his potential doesn't matter. The things that he's passionate about, I want to see him work hard. I want to see him not give up. I want to see him be persistent. I'm going to help him with his mindset. I'm never going to stop fighting for him in that sense. So, that was one lesson I learned from that. But at the same time, I understand, because I think he was afraid that I was going to, like, just completely shut down or just leave at some point and
Mhm.
kind of not be there anymore.
Yeah, well, something you said that I think is really important takeaway for dads to take is, you said if your son were to rebel, you didn't use that word, but if he were to kind of fight and go a direction, you said you change your approach, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think as dads, you got 4 kids. Each of them are so different. They're so different. I cannot discipline, speak to, listen to. I can't do that the same way with each of my kids. It'd be super
Right.
easy if it was. But part of my opportunity is, as the leader of the home, right, is I get to know each of my kids, and that's my responsibility. If this avenue didn't work, then I'm going to try this avenue, then this avenue. And again, I'm with you. Like, I don't want to become the pester, right? I don't want to become annoying. I need to kind of like
Yeah. We got to let them
understand
fail
my kid.
sometimes.
Oh, for sure. Failure is great. It's just that I want to be the guy they trust to come talk to when they do fail. And so the way that I respond, not react to their failures, is like hyper important. And I would say, especially in that like 11 to 13, right? 11 to 13 dads is so freaking critical that you respond and listen and don't react, because then you're setting up for the next 10 years of them coming to you when they hit a failure. It's like such a great opportunity. So in thinking about opportunity as a dad, what would you say in a couple sentences is the role of the father?
Mm. So I've thought a lot about this, and I like the comparison between a bodyguard and a teacher.
Hmm.
And for a long time, I was the bodyguard dad, and especially with like newborns. It's like, no, don't climb that rock wall. You're 10 feet up in the air. You're going to break your neck, right? And sometimes we have to do that. But I've tried to adjust into more of a teacher role, because what I see the difference is, like, a bodyguard is going to protect kids or whoever they're hired to protect.
Yeah.
They're not going to let the danger near. And in certain situations, that's great. Somebody's breaking in your house, like, you're not letting them near your kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
But other situations, normal life situations, I think that the role of a father should be more of a teacher. And, I said something, we got to let our kids fail sometimes. A teacher, a good teacher, is going to teach you how to handle a certain situation. A father is going to teach you what you need to know to be prepared for life, or as best prepared as he possibly can.
Yeah.
And sometimes that involves letting the danger a little bit closer than a metaphorical bodyguard might.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that involves letting them figure it out themselves, letting them fail. I'm a very opinionated person. My way is the best way to do it. I don't care what you have to say. Maybe you can argue that your way is better. And if you convince me, like, I'll begrudgingly change my way, but that's rare. I've had to, the one phrase that I've adopted is I'll look at my kids and I'll silently kind of in my head say, I love you more than I need to be right.
Mm.
Because I've come to realize
Hmm.
that it's being a father isn't about mentally beating them into submission. It's
Yeah.
about teaching them to think for themselves. Because
Yeah.
what happens when you're not there anymore? What happens
Yeah.
when they go off to college or whatever it is that they're doing next? All the bodyguarding in the world isn't going to keep them safe. At some point, they're going to get hurt. They're going to come face to face with a situation that they need to think their way out of, or sometimes, I don't think this is somewhere that we need to go right now, but like sometimes fight their way out of. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to teach them as a teacher and use the things that occurred in their lives, the painful things, as a teaching opportunity instead of an opportunity to go in and fix the situation and be the hero. Like, it's so easy to feel like we're the hero as the dad, especially with young kids.
Mm-hmm.
All of our kids start off seeing us as perfect superheroes, and eventually that changes, right? Like, hopefully later rather than sooner. But it's really tempting to just, especially as a guy, but as a parent, to just fix everything so that you're still the hero. You're upset, your toy broke. Oh, I can fix that. Oh, somebody said something mean to you on the school bus. Well, let me call the principal. Let me get them in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you lost, your team lost. Let's just do participation trophies, right? These are bodyguard actions. We're trying to
Mm-hmm.
protect them from anything dangerous. But instead, I think a father's role is being a teacher. It's saying, oh, you lost. That really sucks. Let me validate and empathize with your feelings. Not just shut them down. I'm not going to shame you for feeling bad. I'm not going to say you should have played better. I'm going to validate what you're feeling. I'm going to empathize. I'm going to acknowledge it. And then I'm going to say, hey, do you want to do better next time?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're ready, I'll tell you exactly what we need to do and I'll do it with you. That's teaching, right? It's not just abandoning them. It's a teacher in school who doesn't just walk out of the room, but it's letting them feel what the real world is like, and then teaching them how to deal with it while they're still under your protection. And you can step in if you really have to, so that when they're not under your protection anymore, they know what they're doing. They know how to protect themselves. They know how to handle this stuff. And I think I struggle with that sometimes, to be honest with you, still. But I think that that's the role of a father.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I love it. And I think that affirmation, because the reality is all us dads, we love to be the fixer. Like,
yeah,
I feel so good about myself when I get to solve a problem for the family. But to pause and go, I love you more than I need to be right. Or, I love you more than I need to be the hero in this situation. I think that those are great affirmations to throw in that Rolodex in your head of things you remind yourself of how you want to show up. Now,
yeah,
you brought something up that I would just love for you to share, because people might not see it on your Instagram, but I think that this would be really helpful because dads will remember and then they will all use this with their kids. But you talked about empathizing with their feelings, right?
yeah.
And so similar to what you talked about is how emotions are like farts. So maybe you could just share that analogy. Like, it's funny, but now everybody's listening, right? So everybody's
Yeah,
reengaged. So share that, because I think that as dads try to talk with their 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 to 15-year-old, right? This
yeah.
analogy is one that they'll use. So hit us with it.
Yeah, cool. So I'll just start off by saying I didn't come up with this. I just put a couple of ideas together, said this to my kids, and then we kind of riffed on it and just
Mm-hmm.
added more things. And I'm not going to remember them all. But the idea is emotions are like farts, and this is a conversation I've had with my kids. Like, they
Cool.
laugh, but I'm
Yeah.
explaining it to them.
And they'll remember
Emotions are,
forever now. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. They got sick of hearing it, I think, after a while. But emotions are like farts, and there's all kinds of ways you can riff on this, but they're painful when we keep them in, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you let them out too aggressively, they can clear a room, right? Like, you only want to let them out around the right people, right?
Mm.
I'm starting to forget some of the other ones. This was a long time ago that I put this out there. But this idea that using humor to teach a lesson, like
Mm-hmm.
that was such a big moment for me. Like, again, I didn't come up with this emotions are like farts thing, but it highlighted how important, like you said, now everybody's re-engaged. Now we've cut
Mm-hmm.
through the noise. Now we've brought the kids back when they're, all right, here we go again with another lesson. Now they're listening, and now they have this memory device, and they're
Yeah.
going to remember, like, I'm really angry, and they can get that little smirk on their face because they think of me saying emotions are like farts. But then they're going to come, and we've given them lots of outlets, but then they're going to come and they're going to have conversations with us because, like you were saying earlier, they trust us to come back and
Mm-hmm.
have these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's so great because emotions aren't bad, right? Fart's
Right.
not bad, but you got to be careful who you do it around. It stinks, right? It can
Yeah.
cause a little bit of headache, but it's not the end of the world. It's going to go away, right? What do we do with this? What is it telling us? I think it's just such a great analogy because, emotions are real. Well,
Mm.
one, with the girls, you got more emotion. And then your son, you also want to teach him, like, dude, it's okay to have emotion. And then how are we letting our emotion out as men? And so I just think the fart analogy just makes it where it's like, dude, this is just, it's part of life. It's part of
Yeah.
life. So how do we process this? So I think it's great for the dudes to have.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see here. What have you learned about yourself through being a father? Right. So we had this big
Mm.
moment where you realized more that was like, who do I want to be as a man? Right. This moment 7 years ago. But then
Yeah.
as you've engaged in fatherhood, what have your kids shown you, revealed to you that you've learned as you've grown as a man the last 7 years?
Yeah. So I think one of the big things is they've they've really helped me with my self-confidence, and that was part of the issue, right?
Mm,
With a lack of self-love, with a self-hatred. John Eldridge wrote a book called Wild at Heart, where he
so
talks
good.
about it's incredible. He brings up this question that he says every boy and man is asking, even though they might not know they're asking, and it's some form of, do I have what it takes?
Mm-hmm.
And I read that and I was like, oh crap. And I go back through my life, everything, trying to prove that I have what it takes, all of the shame, evidence that I didn't have what it takes, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my kids have shown me that I can do way more than I thought I could. In a way, they're showing me that I have what it takes. Like, they're amazing little humans who I've screwed up a lot of things with them. I think I've done some things right, but I've screwed up a lot. And when I can stay, so you're talking about emotions. When I can learn how to handle my kids' emotions, all four of them, but especially my daughters, when I can learn this framework of acknowledge, validate, and empathize, and it starts working with them, that makes me feel like I have what it takes. And then
Mm-hmm.
they turn around and they're wonderful little humans, and I look at them and I'm like, well, I can't take all the credit for that. Um, God did a lot of that. My wife did a lot of that. I had a little bit of impact on them. I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. I thought I was screwing my kids up. 7 years ago, I thought my kids were screwed. I thought they were going to be horrible, miserable people just like me. And so, from both angles, you know, learning to overcome my frustration, learning to, I love you more than I need to be right, learning how to deal with their emotions, learning how to get through to my son, who is very different than the girls. He's like a mirror image of me. So, by learning how to get through to him, I learned how to get through to myself. By
Mm-hmm.
learning how to I had to learn how to be a parent for myself to be a parent for him, basically. And it taught me, I never thought I'd be able to figure that out. I never thought I'd be able to figure me out. And it taught me that I could do not everything in that realm, but that I had what it takes, that I could do much more than I thought I could, that I could handle more stress and not fall apart for my kids than I thought I
Mm-hmm.
could, that we could go through some tough times. um, we had like a 6 month period where I think we had like 6 or 7 emergency room trips that I took one
Yikes.
or the other kids on,
Yep.
mostly one kid. We have that one kid. And it's like, I didn't think I could do that anymore. Like sleep deprivation. I didn't think I would make it through that. I made it through that
Mm-hmm.
with, we have 4 kids. So
Yep.
it's all of that wrapped into, as they're getting older, I get to see them really come into their own and just like, I love them because they're my kids. I love them as a father, but then I look at them and I love the people that they're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's not all me, but I also know that means that I haven't completely failed them and that I did have what it takes.
So good. So good. Locke, this podcast is Fatherhood Field Notes. You're doing it, right? Like opening up your journal, your field notes, sharing it all with us. The mantra behind it is rebel and create. And you kind of brought this up before, that men need a fight, right? They need something to fight for, but not just to be destructive, not just to go break something down. So the idea is, what's something that you're rebelling against? And then what do you hope to create from that?
Well, all kinds of things. I've always been a rebel, but I think that we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think that the deck is stacked, and I don't mean to be like standing on a pedestal and whining, right, when I say this, but I think that the deck is stacked against all of us, but the deck is stacked against fathers. Um, you mentioned the standards for fatherhood; they are so low, it's disgusting. I remember putting some content out about how I got congratulated because I went to the grocery store with my kids, and somebody was like, "Oh, you're such a good dad." And I was like, "Thank you. I guess my ego likes that, but like this is standard
Sad.
stuff. Like we should be doing this." And the fatherhood standards are so low. The status quo is just, to me, disgusting. So like for one thing, rebelling against that kind of standard way of doing it. The way I think about it is like, there's good news and bad news. The good news is it doesn't take much to be a better than average father right now. The bad news is your kids still need more than average or better than average, right? And so what do I want to create with that? I'm trying to create, I've created these men's groups. I'm trying to create these environments of other men who are realizing they're not alone in wanting that same thing. And that was important for me on my journey. I thought I was the only guy struggling with these things. I thought I was the only guy interested in changing himself for the better as a father and a husband. And geographically, I thought, I was completely secluded. So finally, when I found other men who were working on the same things, who were struggling with the same things, who had the same problems, who had the same fight with their wife last week or whatever it was, that was powerful for me. So I want to create a place where guys can go and they know that like we're talking about this stuff. We're talking about how the deck is stacked against us. We're not complaining. We're not whining. We know we're going to beat it. We just need to figure out how. And maybe we have a lot of things figured out how. And we're not going to stop until our kids are set up so that they are beating this deck that's stacked against them. But I want a group of guys who can talk about that and know that it's not complaining, know that it's not whining. Maybe it's emotions. Maybe we need to talk about our emotions. We're not afraid, that guys that aren't afraid to talk about emotions, because the difference between what in my opinion, and therapy is fantastic, but the difference between a men's group and therapy is action. In a men's group, you can come to our men's group, you can come to a conversation like this and we can talk about the emotions we're feeling right now. And at the end, either you or I is going to hold somebody accountable and say, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? We gave you 17 pieces of advice. What are you going to do? When are you going to do it by? And in 2 weeks, when you said you're going to do it, we're going to check back in with you and say, hey, how'd that go? And if it's not done, why isn't it done? We love you, but we'll give you a little bit of a kick in the ass. We're not going to shame you, but we're going to hold you accountable. So that's what I'm trying to create is guys who are not willing to accept this kind of status quo normal definition of fatherhood and manhood and husbandhood, if that's even a word, and are going to help rise above that, help each other rise above that, hold each other accountable.
Dude, so good. All right, I got 3 questions, and then we'll go. Fast forward, couple decades. What kind of grandfather do you want to be? So like we spend a lot of time thinking about our kids and thinking about how kind of dad I want to be, but this doesn't end. Obviously, we're still going to be dads to our kids when they're in their 20s and their 30s. But when they land in their 40s and they're where you are roughly today, what kind of grandfather do you want to be to those grandkids?
I think on one hand, similar to the kind of father that I want to be. I want to be another positive, strong male presence for them. back to bodyguard and teacher. Obviously, I won't be as available. I would love to be as available. I'd love to have them living next door, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Probably not going to happen. But that another strong male presence, and also just when I look down that kind of generational line, I want to know that the way that the model that I provided led to, in a positive way, improving my family tree. And so what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is, right, like the way I treat my wife is how my daughters are going to expect to be treated. I
Yeah.
better get my shit in line in my relationship, because the way
Yep.
that I was, they don't deserve that. I would be
Mm-hmm.
so disappointed if they married a man like me 7 years ago. I'd actually be a little bit disappointed if they married a man like me now. I want them to marry even better. So I got to get even better.
Yep.
Same thing for my son. I'm obviously giving him the model of how to be a man, but the relationship I have with his mother is going to affect his relationship with his wife. And
Yep.
I want to see the ripple effects of that down the line. Obviously, there's variations, and different people are different, but I want to look at that, and from a vantage point, I want to kind of enjoy the fruits of our labors in one sense,
Mm-hmm.
and then I want to kind of roll my sleeves up and then get involved in as much as I can. I want to be taking the grandkids, so that my kids and their spouses can have time to themselves. I want to be coaching their teams if they're local enough for me to coach. I want to be
Mm.
involved on a lot of levels the same way I'm involved as a father now, because if we're looking at the trend, if we're looking at the deck that's stacked against us, we're going to need more and more. So as we go into the future and the years ahead, we're going to need father figures that are strong and capable and loving and kind. We're going to need that more than ever. So I'm
Mm.
actually kind of excited about that. A little bit of the pressure is off as a grandfather, but I can still step in and do the same things that I'm trying to do now.
Love it. As you think about your kids one day having families, right? We've talked a lot about them personally, like how they feel about themselves, and then also what they're going to look for in a spouse. But what's a skill that, let's say, shoot, I've never asked it this way. I usually ask when your kid's leaving your house, what's a skill you want them to have? But on their wedding day, what's a skill that
Mm.
you want to be sitting there in the crowd, front row, watching this go down? What's a skill that you're going to go like, oh man, Ned and I talked about this on, November 15th, 2024. And this is true. Like my son knows this, my daughters know this. What's that piece, that skill that they're going to take into that marriage?
Mm. I've never been asked this question before. It's a great question. And I know immediately my answer is gonna maybe take you back a little bit, but it's how to fight in a relationship.
Hmm.
Um,
I
I
think
think,
that's really important. I think,
yeah.
guys, you got to hear this. This is important. Go on.
Well, I know people personally. My wife has a friend who's like, "Oh yeah, we've never fought in our relationship." And there's a couple quotes out there. I think it's the John Gottman quote where he says something like, "A relationship that has no fights has a lot of secrets." And not like sneaking around behind their backs, but it's like you must not know what your spouse really thinks if you've never disagreed with them.
Right.
And so, like in our case, like I said in the beginning, my daughters are spicy. They get it from me. They get it from their mother.
Yeah.
Um, in our relationship, we disagree, and we disagreed wrong. And our kids have seen us fight, and I'm not proud of that, but I'm also not going to lie about that.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids have also seen us learn how to do it in a respectful way. Come up with ground rules where certain things are off limits,
Mm-hmm.
where certain tones of voice are like, hey, stop talking to me like that. And if you don't stop, like then someone disengages. And we're trying to teach that to our kids as we go, how to resolve conflict between themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But in a marriage like this, I think this is the key. If you're not fighting, then something's wrong. But if you're fighting so bad that it's the roller coaster of like, we're
Yeah.
doomed, we're okay. We're doomed, we're okay. Like the two extremes are not good. And
Mm-hmm.
to think that you're not ever going to disagree is foolish. So learning how to fight, learning how to do it respectfully, I think was one of the, and we still don't have it down perfectly, but I think it was one of the things that saved our relationship,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's just unrealistic to think it's not going to be needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that it's like clearly, even if you've been in those seasons where the fights you would say or deem like, God, I would never want somebody to see this, it's inappropriate or too much or whatever. you still found reconciliation, right? So
Right.
you're still together, you're still here. And I think that's a great thing for the kids is there are going to be times where life is probably super shitty and like this is not going to end well. You know what I mean? But showing reconciliation that we figured out a way, I think is so helpful for kids to go, okay, even when it seems hopeless, there's always a way. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that is such a good answer for the question about like being there at your kid's wedding. All right, last question, my friend, is legacy question. If you are now fast forwarding past wedding 10, 15 years later, and you're standing out in the street looking into your kid's home, they have kids themselves. What do you see being played out inside that home that just puts a smile on your face going, yes, this is what I fought so hard for?
Yeah. Just love and laughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned humor before. Humor is a big piece of it. Just laughing and having fun. And I think probably I would add feeling safe, because 7 years ago my kids didn't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, my wife didn't feel safe. And I don't want my kids or their kids or anyone down the line to feel unsafe in their own home with their own parents. And so I think there's a safety piece, and I also think there's a laughter piece, whether that's just fun or whether it's humor. I love, when my 5-year-old is like sarcastic and telling jokes, and we go to a we go to a community group, and my 7-year-old says something, and the entire group is just laughing. Like, I love that they were able to get a sense of humor from my wife and me, because I've seen other kids who, like, I'll joke, I coach basketball. I, see my friends' friend or my kids' friends. And, sometimes you'll come across a kid and you'll be fooling around with them and you'll tell them a joke and they just don't have a sense of humor. It's like, I want to see that sense of humor continue, because I think that brings so much joy. So safety and humor, I guess, is what I'm going to go with as my final answer.
Yeah, well, I think that in that word laughter, it brings so much, right? Like, I can't be in a home with a spouse and with kids. And if there's laughter, that means there's so much foundation that has been built there, that if we can feel safe and confident to like just be silly, I just think that there's so much foundational work that's been done if laughter's happening in relationships.
Yeah.
Locke, my friend, I have so enjoyed getting to meet you the last hour and learning more about you. Thank you for the work that you've done on yourself, not just for the sake of you and your marriage and your kids, but the fact that you share it with the world. You have a desire to help other men see the truth of who they are. And I just know without a doubt that the work you're doing today, it's just going to go on beyond your lifetime. It's going to go your own family tree, and also other men. So seriously, kudos and thank you for the work you're doing and that you continue to do. And I hope that our paths cross again in the future.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I appreciate the invitation. This was a great conversation.
All right, my friend, much love and blessing, and we'll connect again soon. What an incredible conversation. The component, the piece, the rock that I will be adding to my own mind as I lead, love, and serve my family is this idea that I love you more than I need to be right. I love you more than I need to have the answer. That I would internally remind myself that I don't always have to say something. I don't always have to be the hero in the moment. That really, if as a father, I want to be the guide, that I can hold back, I can stand back, I can learn to assess the situation and go, what does my kid need from me right now? Maybe it is wisdom, maybe it is an answer, but more than not, it's probably just to be quiet and listen so that they can learn as I serve as a guide to them. My friends, thank you for listening. Please write a review if you haven't already. Please shoot a text to a dad saying, hey, dude, I see you. You matter. You're a great dad. And if you want to include a link to this episode, that would be fantastic so that we can continue to spread the word that fatherhood matters. Thank you to all you dudes out there listening to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast. What you do matters. Don't be like everybody else. Be yourself. That's who your kids, spouse, and community needs. This is your guide, Ned. Shout together. Let's rebel against the view that fatherhood has little impact, and let's create lives engaged in mastering the craft of fatherhood. I look forward to hanging out with you next time.